Picture this. You're standing in a hospital corridor at 2 a.m. Behind one door is a patient screaming at every nurse who tries to help them. They're rude, demanding, impossible to please. Behind another door is someone who whispers thank you for every small kindness, who apologizes for taking up space, who smiles even through their pain. Which person do you think needs love more? If you're like most people, you'd say the polite one deserves your compassion. The difficult one, well, they're just difficult. They made their bed, right? But here's what will change everything you think you know about human nature. The person screaming, pushing everyone away, making themselves impossible to love. They're the one who needs it most. And that's not a coincidence. That's not irony. That's psychology. The people who need love most are the hardest to love. And once you understand why, you'll never look at difficult people the same way again. You'll never look at yourself the same way again. Because here's the uncomfortable truth we're going to explore today. Every single one of us has been that difficult person. Every one of us has pushed away the very thing we needed most. And understanding this paradox isn't just about becoming more compassionate toward others, it's about understanding the deepest patterns of human suffering and healing. What if I told you that the most challenging people in your life are actually showing you their deepest wounds? What if their difficulty isn't a character flaw, but a survival mechanism? What if their push to keep you away is actually a desperate pull for you to stay? This isn't feel-good psychology. This isn't about excusing bad behavior. This is about understanding something so fundamental about human nature that once you see it, you can't unsee it. And it will transform not just how you treat others, but how you understand your own moments of darkness. Stay with me, because what we're about to discover will challenge everything you think you know about love, pain, and what it means to be human. The story that changes everything. Let me tell you about Sarah, not her real name, but her story is real and it's more common than you think. Sarah was 8 years old when her father left. No explanation, no goodbye, just an empty chair at the breakfast table and a mother who couldn't stop crying. At 8, Sarah didn't understand abandonment. She understood cause and effect. Something she did made Daddy leave. Something about her was wrong. Fast forward 20 years. Sarah is in her third relationship that's falling apart. But here's what her partners don't see. Sarah doesn't fight because she doesn't care. She fights because she cares too much. Every small disappointment feels like abandonment. Every moment of distance feels like rejection. Every imperfect response from her partner feels like proof that she was right all along. She is unlovable. So Sarah does what wounded people do. She tests, she pushes, she creates the very rejection she fears most, because at least when she creates it, she has control. At least when she pushes you away first, you can't surprise her by leaving. Her partners see someone who's never satisfied, someone who picks fights, someone who's exhausting to be around. They see someone who doesn't appreciate their love. But Sarah isn't rejecting their love. She's terrified of it, because every time someone has loved her, they've left. And her 8-year-old brain learned a simple equation. Love equals pain. Attachment equals abandonment. The cruelest irony? The more desperately Sarah needs love, the more impossible she makes it for others to give it to her. But here's where it gets deeper, and this is where you need to pay attention. Sarah's behavior isn't random, it's not malicious, it's strategic. Her unconscious mind has one job: protect her from the pain of abandonment. And the best way to avoid abandonment? Make yourself unlovable. Push people away before they can leave. Create distance before intimacy can hurt you. This is the psychology of the wounded. They need connection more than anything, but their survival strategies make connection impossible. And here's what's going to blow your mind. We all do this. Maybe not as dramatically as Sarah, but we all have our versions. The colleague who's impossible to work with. They might be terrified of not being good enough. The friend who's always cancelling plans. They might be convinced you don't really want them there. The family member who picks fights at every gathering. They might be desperately trying to feel like they matter. The behaviors that make people hardest to love are often the clearest signals that they need love most. But here's where this story takes an unexpected turn. Sarah met someone who understood this paradox, someone who saw through her defenses to the wound underneath, someone who didn't take her pushing personally, who didn't give up when she tested them, who stayed when her behavior screamed leave. And slowly, something miraculous happened. When Sarah realized that her worst behavior couldn't drive this person away, she stopped needing to use it. When she felt safe in love, she stopped fighting it. When she experienced unconditional acceptance, she stopped testing it. The person who needed love most became the person who could receive it. The psychology behind the paradox. Now let's dive into the science of why this happens, because understanding the mechanism changes everything. Dr. John Bowlby's attachment theory reveals something profound about human development. The way we're loved as children becomes the blueprint for how we expect to be loved as adults. Children who experience consistent, reliable love develop what psychologists call secure attachment. They learn that they're worthy of love, that love is safe, and that relationships can be trusted. But children who experience inconsistent love, conditional love, or abandonment develop what's called insecure attachment. And here's the key. They don't learn that they're unlovable. They learn that love is dangerous. Think about that distinction. It's not that wounded people don't believe they deserve love, it's that they've learned love comes with a cost. Love means vulnerability. Vulnerability means the possibility of pain. And if you've been hurt deeply enough, avoiding that pain becomes more important than receiving that love. This is where the research gets fascinating. Dr. Amir Levine's studies on adult attachment show that people with anxious attachment styles, those who need love most desperately, are also the most likely to engage in behaviors that sabotage their relationships. They're hypersensitive to signs of rejection. They interpret neutral behaviors as negative, and they often respond to their fear of abandonment by creating abandonment. It's like someone dying of thirst but being afraid to drink because the last water they trusted was poisoned. But here's where Eastern philosophy adds a layer that Western psychology sometimes misses. Buddhist teachings talk about the concept of hungry ghosts, beings with enormous appetites but tiny mouths who can never satisfy their hunger, no matter how much they consume. This isn't just metaphor. This is the exact psychological state of someone whose early wounds have created an insatiable need for love combined with an inability to receive it. The Stoic philosophers understood this too, but from a different angle. Marcus Aurelius wrote about how our perceptions shape our reality, how the stories we tell ourselves about others' intentions determine our experience of them. When someone expects rejection, they interpret every interaction through that lens. A delayed text becomes evidence of disinterest. A moment of distraction becomes proof of abandonment. And here's where modern neuroscience confirms what ancient wisdom suspected. Our brains are prediction machines. They're constantly scanning for patterns, especially patterns related to survival and safety. If your brain learned early that love leads to pain, it will spend your entire life trying to protect you from that pain, even if it means protecting you from love itself. Dr. Dan Siegel's research on interpersonal neurobiology shows us that trauma literally rewires the brain's threat detection systems. Someone who was hurt by the people who were supposed to love them develops a hyperactive amygdala, the brain's alarm system. They're constantly scanning for danger, especially in intimate relationships. They see threats where others see invitations. They feel rejection where others feel connection. This is why the people who need love most often exhibit behaviors that make them hardest to love. Their protective strategies are working exactly as designed to keep them safe from the thing they need most. But here's what's truly remarkable. This same research shows us that the brain retains neuroplasticity throughout life. The patterns that were created by early hurt can be rewired by later healing. The defenses that were built to protect us can be slowly, carefully dismantled when we experience enough safety to risk vulnerability again. The ancient Greeks had a word, philoxenia, love of strangers, but there's a deeper wisdom here. Sometimes we need to extend philoxenia to the stranger within the people we know, to see past their defenses to the wound underneath, to love not just who they are when they're easy to love, but who they are when they're impossible to love, because that's when they need it most. The contrast that changes everything. Let me paint you two pictures and just watch how differently they make you feel. Picture one. You walk into a coffee shop and the barista greets you with a genuine smile. They remember your usual order, ask about your day, and their warmth feels real. You leave feeling a little lighter, a little more connected to humanity. This person is easy to love. Their warmth invites your warmth. Their kindness reflects back your own goodness. Now, picture two. You walk into that same coffee shop, but today the barista is different. They're short with you, they seem irritated by your order, and they avoid eye contact. Maybe they're even slightly rude. You leave feeling frustrated, maybe a little angry. This person is hard to love. Their coldness triggers your own defensiveness. Their rejection activates your own walls. Now here's the question that changes everything. Which barista needs your compassion more? The first barista might be having a great day. They might come from a loving family, feel secure in their relationships, and have the emotional resources to be generous with strangers. Their warmth might cost them nothing. The second barista might be barely holding it together. Maybe they're working 3 jobs to pay for their sick mother's medication. Maybe they just got out of an abusive relationship. Maybe they're struggling with depression and using every ounce of energy they have just to show up. Their coldness might be the only thing standing between them and complete breakdown. Yet which one do we naturally want to help? Which one do we instinctively show kindness to? We reward good behavior and withdraw from difficult behavior. We give love to those who are already loving and withhold it from those who can't access their own loving nature. This is the tragedy of human psychology. We give our resources to those who already have resources, and we withhold from those who are depleted. Think about this in your own life. When do you most need patience from others? Is it when you're at your best, feeling confident and secure? Or is it perhaps when you're struggling, overwhelmed, maybe not showing up as your highest self? And when do you most need forgiveness? Is it when you've done nothing wrong, or when you've made mistakes because you're human and flawed and hurting? When do you most need someone to see the good in you? Is it when it's easy to see, or when it's buried under layers of defense and pain? Yet when do people most naturally offer these things? It's usually when we're already doing well, when we're easy to be around, when loving us costs them nothing. The people who are thriving get more support, more love, more opportunities. The people who are struggling get more judgment, more distance, more isolation. It's a psychological poverty trap. The less you have, the less you get. But what happens when we flip this script? What happens when we consciously choose to offer our best energy to those who are struggling most? What happens when we learn to see difficult behavior as a cry for help rather than a character flaw? Something extraordinary happens, something that really changes both them and us. Because here's what most people don't understand about love. Love isn't just something we give to people who deserve it. Love is something we use to help people become who they're capable of being. Love isn't a reward for good behavior. Love is the tool that creates good behavior. When someone feels truly seen, truly accepted, truly valued, even in their difficult moments, they start to relax the defenses that made them difficult in the first place. When someone experiences unconditional positive regard, they begin to heal the wounds that created their conditional behavior. This is why the hardest people to love often become the most grateful when they finally receive it. This is why the most challenging relationships, when they work, become the most transformative. And this really is why loving difficult people isn't just about helping them. It's about discovering a deeper capacity for love within ourselves. The art of loving the unlovable. So how do we actually do this? How do we love people who seem determined to make themselves unlovable? How do we extend compassion to those who appear to reject it? How do we maintain our own emotional health while supporting someone who might be struggling with theirs? This isn't about becoming a martyr. This isn't about accepting abuse or sacrificing your own well-being. This is about developing a sophisticated understanding of human behavior and responding with both wisdom and compassion. First, learn to separate the person from their protective strategies. When someone is being difficult, ask yourself, what wound might this behavior be protecting? The colleague who micromanages everything might be terrified of failure. The friend who's always defensive might be carrying shame from childhood. The family member who criticizes everything might be struggling with their own feelings of inadequacy. This doesn't excuse the behavior, but it helps you understand it, and understanding changes how you respond. Instead of taking their behavior personally, you start to see it as information about their internal state. Second, practice what psychologists call unconditional positive regard. This is a concept from Carl Rogers' humanistic psychology. It means separating your acceptance of the person from your approval of their behavior. You can disapprove of what someone does while still holding space for who they are underneath. This sounds simple, but it's revolutionary in practice. It means saying, I don't like how you're treating me right now, but I still care about you. It means setting boundaries without withdrawing love. It means holding someone accountable while still seeing their humanity. Third, become curious instead of reactive. When someone pushes you away instead of pushing back, get curious. What's happening inside you right now that makes connection feel dangerous? What are you afraid might happen if you let me get close? What's the story you're telling yourself about what my love means? Most people have never been asked these questions. Most people have only had their defenses met with more defenses, their walls met with higher walls. Curiosity breaks this cycle. It creates space for truth instead of reaction. All right, so fourth, practice what I call loving persistence. Now, this doesn't mean being a doormat, not at all. And it doesn't mean accepting poor treatment either. What it really means is continuing to see someone's worth even when they can't see it themselves. It's about showing up consistently, not just when it's convenient for you. It's about proving through your actions that your love isn't conditional on their performance. But here's the crucial part. Loving persistence requires boundaries. You can love someone unconditionally while still protecting your own emotional health. You can hold space for someone's pain while not allowing them to transfer that pain to you. And you can be compassionate without being codependent. Fifth, understand the timeline of trust. People who've been deeply hurt don't heal overnight. They've spent years, maybe even decades, building walls to protect themselves. Those walls don't just come down because of one conversation or one kind gesture or even one moment of understanding. Healing happens in layers, slowly, carefully, with a kind of patience that, honestly, most people aren't willing to invest. This is why loving difficult people is an art, not a technique. It requires emotional intelligence, personal strength, and really a long-term perspective. It also requires understanding that setbacks aren't failures, they're just part of the process. Sixth, learn to see the gift in the challenge. Difficult people, well, they're actually our greatest teachers. They show us the limits of our compassion and invite us to expand them. They reveal our own triggers and give us opportunities to heal them. They force us to dig deeper into our own capacity for love, for patience, and for understanding. Every person who challenges you is also offering you a chance to grow. Every relationship that tests your limits is, in fact, expanding them. Every moment when someone is hard to love is also a moment when your love becomes more powerful. But perhaps most importantly, learn to apply this understanding to yourself, because the truth is, you are sometimes the person who needs love most and is hardest to love. You have moments when your own wounds make you difficult. You have times when your defenses push away the very support you need, and in those moments the same wisdom applies. The parts of yourself that are hardest to love, your insecurities, your defensive reactions, your moments of smallness, these are the parts that need your compassion most. The science of transformation. What happens in the brain when someone who's been starved of love finally receives it consistently? The neuroscience is honestly remarkable, and it explains why loving difficult people isn't just kind, it's transformative. Dr. Daniel Siegel's research shows that when we feel truly seen and accepted, our nervous system shifts from a state of chronic defense to a state of openness. The amygdala, that alarm center we talked about, begins to calm down. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for emotional regulation and rational thinking, comes back online. In simple terms, when difficult people feel safe in relationship, they stop needing to be difficult. But here's where it gets really interesting. Studies on neuroplasticity show that the brain can literally rewire itself based on repeated experiences of safety and love. Dr. Luis Cozzolino's research on the neuroscience of relationships reveals that healing relationships don't just change our behavior, they change our brain structure. Someone who's lived their entire life expecting rejection can actually develop new neural pathways that expect acceptance. Someone whose brain has been wired for hypervigilance can learn to relax into trust. Someone who's never felt worthy of love can develop the capacity to receive it. This is why loving difficult people isn't just charity, it's alchemy. You're literally helping to reshape their neural architecture. You're participating in one of the most profound transformations possible, the healing of a human nervous system. The research on post-traumatic growth supports this too. People who've experienced significant challenges and then received adequate support don't just return to their baseline, they often become more compassionate, more resilient, more emotionally intelligent than people who've never been wounded. The very people who were hardest to love become some of the most loving once they've healed. Because they understand suffering intimately, they develop extraordinary capacity for empathy. Because they've experienced the transformative power of unconditional love, they become willing to offer it to others. Think about the most compassionate people you know. I'll bet many of them have stories of struggle, of being difficult, of needing someone to see past their defenses to their humanity. I'll bet many of them can tell you about someone who loved them when they were hard to love, and how that love changed everything. This is the ripple effect of understanding this principle. When you love someone through their difficulty, you don't just heal them, you help them become a healer. When you see past someone's defenses to their worthiness, you help them develop the ability to see past others' defenses too. The people who need love most don't just become easier to love once they receive it. They become people who excel at loving others, who are difficult to love. But let's be honest about something most motivational content won't tell you. This is hard. Loving difficult people will challenge every instinct you have for self-preservation. It will trigger your own wounds, your own insecurities, your own defensive patterns. Because here's what happens when you try to love someone who's hard to love. You discover all the ways you're hard to love too. When someone pushes you away, you might discover how quickly you withdraw your affection. When someone tests your patience, you might realize how conditional your compassion really is. When someone's pain triggers their worst behavior, you might see how your own pain triggers yours. The most difficult person in your life is often a mirror reflecting back the parts of yourself you haven't healed yet. This is why loving difficult people is ultimately an act of self-development. Every time you choose compassion over reactivity, you're strengthening your own emotional resilience. Every time you see past someone's defenses to their humanity, you're developing your own capacity for wisdom. Every time you offer love to someone who seems to reject it, you're expanding your own understanding of what love really means. And here's where this gets really deep. Sometimes the person who needs love most and is hardest to love is yourself. How do you treat yourself when you make mistakes? When you're not living up to your own standards, when you're struggling with depression, anxiety, or just the ordinary challenges of being human? Are you patient with your own learning process, or do you become your own harshest critic? Most of us are much harder on ourselves than we'd ever be on others. Most of us withdraw love from ourselves the moment we need it most. Most of us become difficult for ourselves to love precisely when we need our own compassion most desperately. The person staring back at you in the mirror might be struggling with self-worth, might be carrying wounds from the past, might be using defensive strategies that make them hard to love, even for themselves, especially for themselves. Learning to extend love to difficult people starts with learning to extend love to the difficult parts of yourself. Learning to see past others' defenses requires first learning to see past your own. Learning to offer unconditional positive regard to others begins with offering it to yourself. This is why this principle is so transformative. It doesn't just change how you relate to difficult people, it changes how you relate to your own difficulty. It doesn't just make you more compassionate toward others' wounds, it makes you more healing toward your own. Now let's address the elephant in the room. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes people are so wounded, so defended, so caught in destructive patterns that even the most patient, understanding, unconditional love can't reach them. Sometimes people aren't ready to be loved. Sometimes their pain is so great that they can only experience love as a threat. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back. This isn't giving up. This isn't failing. This is understanding that love without boundaries becomes enabling and helping without limits becomes harmful. There's a difference between loving someone through their difficulty and allowing someone to transfer their difficulty to you. There's a difference between seeing past someone's defenses and allowing those defenses to damage you. There's a difference between understanding someone's wounds and letting those wounds become your responsibility to heal. Professional therapists understand this balance. They offer unconditional positive regard within clear boundaries. They provide consistent support without taking responsibility for their clients' choices. They hold space for people's pain without absorbing that pain themselves. The most effective way to love difficult people often involves what psychologists call detached compassion, caring deeply while remaining emotionally regulated yourself. It means seeing their struggle with empathy while not making their struggle your emergency. Sometimes the most loving thing you can say is, I care about you and I can see you're in pain, but I can't be in relationship with you while you're treating me this way. Sometimes love requires consequences. Sometimes compassion requires distance. But here's what's crucial. Even when you step back, you can do so with understanding rather than judgment. Even when you create boundaries, you can maintain your recognition of their fundamental worthiness. Even when you choose not to engage with someone's difficult behavior, you can still hold space for their humanity. This is perhaps the highest form of love, seeing someone's worth even when you can't be in relationship with them. Wishing them healing even when you can't be part of their healing journey. Holding compassion for their pain even when you need to protect yourself from the effects of that pain. And sometimes this is exactly what someone needs. Sometimes the most healing thing that can happen to someone who pushes everyone away is for someone to leave with love instead of anger, with understanding instead of judgment, with hope for their healing instead of resentment for their behavior. Because even when love can't immediately heal someone, it can plant seeds that might grow later. Even when compassion can't immediately transform someone, it can stay with them as a memory of possibility, a reminder that they are worthy of good things, even when they can't access those good things themselves. The practical path forward. So how do you actually implement this understanding in your daily life? How do you train yourself to see past difficult behavior to the need underneath? How do you develop the emotional intelligence to love people through their defenses without losing yourself in the process? Start with small moments of choice. The next time someone is short with you, instead of matching their energy, just take a breath and ask yourself, what might this person need right now? Instead of taking their behavior personally, try to see it as information about their internal state. The cashier who's rude might be having the worst day of their life. The driver who cuts you off might be racing to the hospital. The friend who snaps at you might be overwhelmed with stress you know nothing about. This doesn't mean accepting poor treatment. It means responding from understanding rather than reactivity. Practice the pause. Between someone's difficult behavior and your response, there's a space. In that space lies your power to choose. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, wrote, "Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Use that space." When someone triggers you, pause and ask, how do I want to respond to this person's pain? Because honestly, difficult behavior is almost always pain in disguise. Develop emotional regulation skills. You can't pour from an empty cup. You can't offer stability to someone else if you're emotionally dysregulated yourself. Invest in your own emotional health. Learn meditation, practice mindfulness, develop self-awareness. The stronger your own foundation, the more support you can offer others. And learn to read the signals. Difficult people often communicate their needs indirectly. The person who's always angry might be saying, I feel powerless and this is the only way I know how to feel strong. The person who's always critical might be saying, I'm terrified of not being good enough. The person who withdraws might be saying, I don't want to burden you with my pain. So it's really important to learn to translate difficult behavior into the underlying need. Not to excuse it, but to understand it, not to enable it, but to respond to the real issue underneath. Practice radical empathy. Try to imagine what it would be like to live inside someone else's experience. What would it be like to carry their wounds, their fears, their history? What would it be like to navigate the world with their nervous system, their triggers, their learned patterns of protection? This isn't about making excuses for poor behavior. This is about developing the capacity to hold complexity, to see someone as both responsible for their choices and shaped by their experiences, both capable of change and currently limited by their wounds. Remember that your response is your choice. You can't control how others behave, but you can always control how you respond to their behavior. You can choose to see their difficulty as an attack, or you can choose to see it as information. You can choose to match their energy, or you can choose to offer something different. Every difficult interaction is an opportunity to practice love as a skill rather than just a feeling. Every challenging person is a chance to strengthen your own emotional muscles. Every moment when someone is hard to love is a moment when your love can become more powerful. The transformation that awaits. What happens when you truly embrace this principle? What changes when you start seeing difficult people as wounded rather than malicious? What transforms when you begin offering your best energy to those who seem to deserve it least? Everything changes. First, your relationships deepen. When people feel truly seen and accepted by you, especially in their moments of struggle, they begin to trust you with their authentic selves. The walls come down, the defenses soften. You start to see sides of people that few others ever witness. Second, your own emotional resilience grows. Each time you choose compassion over reactivity, you're literally rewiring your own brain. You're training yourself to respond from your highest self rather than your triggered self. You're developing what the Stoics called the discipline of desire, the ability to want what serves everyone rather than just what serves your ego. Third, you become a safe person. Others start to seek you out, not just when they're doing well, but when they're struggling. You become someone people trust with their difficulties, their fears, their moments of not knowing how to cope. You become a source of healing in a world full of judgment. Fourth, you start to understand love at a deeper level. Love stops being just a feeling and becomes a practice. It stops being just a reward for good behavior and becomes a tool for transformation. It stops being something you withhold until people prove they deserve it and becomes something you offer specifically when they need it most. But perhaps most importantly, you start to heal your own deepest wounds. Because every time you offer love to someone who's hard to love, you're proving to yourself that you're worthy of that same love. Every time you see past someone's defenses to their humanity, you're learning to see past your own defenses to your own humanity. The people who've learned to love the difficult, the wounded, the defended, they've often learned it because someone once loved them through their own difficulty. They know firsthand the transformative power of being seen, accepted and valued even in their worst moments. This creates a beautiful cycle. Wounded people who receive unconditional love become healers. Difficult people who experience patience become patient. Defensive people who encounter understanding become understanding. The love you offer to someone who's hard to love doesn't just change them, it changes you. It makes you more compassionate, more resilient, more emotionally intelligent. It makes you someone who can hold space for the full range of human experience, not just the pretty parts. And here's the ultimate realization. In a world that offers love conditionally, offering it unconditionally makes you powerful. In a culture that withdraws support when people struggle, continuing to offer support makes you transformative. In a society that sees difficult people as problems to be solved, seeing them as humans to be loved makes you revolutionary. But let's go even deeper, because there's something about this principle that touches the very core of what it means to be human. The people who need love most are the hardest to love, because love is the most powerful force for transformation that exists. And transformation is terrifying to a wounded nervous system. Think about it. If you've spent your entire life believing you're unworthy of love, then love becomes the most threatening thing in the world. Because if you accept it, you have to give up the story that's been protecting you. If you believe it, you have to rebuild your entire sense of self. This is why people often get worse before they get better when they start receiving genuine love. This is why relationships often hit their most difficult moments right before breakthrough. This is why people sometimes sabotage the best things in their lives. Love demands that we change. Love asks us to grow beyond our current limitations. Love invites us to become more than we've been. And for someone whose entire identity is built around being unworthy, unlovable, or damaged, this invitation can feel like annihilation. The person who's been abandoned learns to expect abandonment. The person who's been criticized learns to expect criticism. The person who's been rejected learns to expect rejection. Their entire nervous system organizes around these expectations. Their whole sense of self is built on these experiences. When you offer them something different, acceptance instead of rejection, patience instead of criticism, commitment instead of abandonment, you're not just offering love, you're offering them a complete reconstruction of their reality. This is why the people who need love most often fight it hardest. This is why the most wounded among us often push away the very medicine they need. Love isn't just nice, it's revolutionary, and revolution is scary, even when it's healing. But here's what's beautiful. Every time someone accepts love despite their fear, they become living proof that transformation is possible. Every time someone lets down their defenses and discovers they're safe, they become evidence that healing exists. And every time someone who is hard to love becomes able to receive love, they become a beacon of hope for everyone else who's still struggling. This is why your choice to love difficult people matters so much. It's not just about them. It's about contributing to a world where wounded people can heal, where defensive people can learn to trust, where everyone who's been told they're unlovable can, discover their own worthiness. So here we are at the end of our journey, but really at the beginning of a different way of being in the world. You now understand that difficult behavior is often wounded behavior. You know that the people who push you away might be the ones who need you most. And you see that love isn't just a feeling, it's a practice, a choice, a skill that can transform both the giver and the receiver. But understanding isn't enough. Knowledge without action is just sophisticated entertainment. The question now is, what are you going to do with this understanding? Are you going to look at the difficult people in your life differently? Are you going to respond to defensive behavior with curiosity instead of reactivity? Are you going to offer your patience to those who seem to test it most? Are you going to become someone who specializes in loving the unlovable? Someone who sees past the surface to the wound underneath? Someone who offers their best energy to those who seem to deserve it least? Because the world needs people who understand this principle. The world needs people who, can see through difficult behavior to the pain that drives it. The world needs people who can offer love not as a reward for good behavior, but as a tool for healing. Every day, you encounter people who are struggling. Some show it obviously. They're sad, withdrawn, asking for help. Others hide it behind anger, criticism, or impossible standards. Both need your compassion, but honestly, the second group needs it more urgently because they're less likely to receive it. Every interaction is a choice. Every moment of someone being difficult is an opportunity to either confirm their worst beliefs about themselves and the world, or to offer them a different experience. Every time someone pushes you away, you can either let them succeed or you can gently refuse to be pushed. This doesn't mean being a pushover, this doesn't mean accepting abuse, this doesn't mean sacrificing your own well-being for others' comfort. This means being strong enough to offer love even when it's not immediately returned, wise enough to see need behind demand, and patient enough to plant seeds that might not bloom for years. But here's the secret that makes this sustainable. The more you practice loving difficult people, the easier it becomes. Not because people become less difficult, but because you become more loving. Not because others change, but because you develop the capacity to remain centered in your compassion regardless of how others are showing up. And eventually something magical